presentation entitled Amplifying Buffalo Blackness, a rapid response webinar for the community and especially our fellow educators on the line. My day job is teaching American history at Springville Middle School, but I'm joined here by several fellow teachers and our Academy board and staff to learn more about what we should be teaching about the east side of Buffalo and to amplify voices of color in our community. So it's great to be with everyone here tonight. I'm, believe it or not, coming to you live from Emporia, Kansas, where I'm being inducted into the National Teachers Hall of Fame this Friday evening. And because of my overscheduling here, forgive me, I'm going to be leaving the call in a couple minutes, and our Associate Director, Betty Haynes, will be having the pleasure of doing the interview of our panel tonight. But if I could, I'd just like to show you a couple events that you're going to want to be a part of, especially if you're a teacher. The first is a conference that's perhaps the first of its kind in a country. You know, there's no shortage of climate change seminars for science teachers, but that's not enough. We need elementary teachers doing it, and social studies teachers like Betty and I, and, you know, language arts teachers, believe it or not. It's an all hands on deck moment. And so working with our great partners at Erie County and Erie 1 and Erie 2 Chautauqua County BOCES, we're staging a 2-day event for teachers that is for a phenomenally low $25 cost that has a day one component of learning more about the science of climate and solutions, featuring Paul Hawken, who's arguably the world's top climate solutionist, and Buffalo's own Dr. Don Haas, who co-wrote the book, the teacher-friendly book about climate and teaching about climate. And day two, we're going to be getting on a bus and seeing sustainability sites in Buffalo. You know, that including the home of one of our speakers today, Dawn, the Associate Deputy Director of Push Buffalo. And we're going to be thrilled to take a tour of the sustainability sites on the west side and all over Erie County. So please, the registration has been slow for this event. Our PR was admittedly slow, and that's on me. But we're hoping that you can all take the ball and run with it and bring a colleague, bring an administrator, bring a school board member, because this is a fledgling educational industry that the Academy is leading. And, you know, we hope you can join in. The second one is for students in the area, from incoming ninth graders through graduating seniors. It's the 15th annual summer symposium for young people that's run with our great partners at Erie 1 BOCES. And this year's theme is not found in textbooks. So it's looking at things that probably should be taught in classrooms like mine, but aren't due to a variety of reasons. And we try not to admire those problems, but give our students the concrete skills to be leaders, to be activists, and to help them live contributory lives, whatever their career interests are. So Katie will be dropping in, you know, the URL codes for registration in both of these events. Scholarships are available for the Academy with no questions asked due to our wonderful donors and sponsors, many of whom are on the screen tonight. From Berkeley to Connecticut, we love you, and we're so thankful that you make these events possible. So with that said, you know, I'd like to introduce our panelists introduce themselves. And Dr. Mark Abraham, tell us more about you.
I think I'm just going to keep my my deal here off of mute so that I won't have to keep going back and forth. Again, my name is Dr. Mark Abraham. I'm the president and CEO of MEA Consulting Services, LLC, one of the fastest growing consulting companies in the country. I'm also the author of this amazing book, What Success Looks Like, Increasing Graduation Rates for Young Men of Color. I am a former high school principal in Buffalo, New York, where I was noted by the New York State Department of Education for taking a graduation rate from 60% to 87% and 93% for Black males. Now I am a consultant that goes around the country lecturing on my book, but also giving school leaders practical strategies on how to increase student performance and graduation rates for all students, but really primarily the most marginalized group in the country, which is our Black and brown males. The work that I do is pretty amazing. I've had the opportunity now to work in Utah, to Arkansas, to Alaska, to Alabama, to Florida, and really I travel around the whole country supporting school leadership, supporting school leaders and their teachers in this amazing work. So that's just a little bit about me, and I'm excited to be here. And most importantly, I'm excited to have all of you teachers here that are so committed that you'll give up this time in the evening time to really learn more. So really kudos to you for your commitment to this work.
Thank you, Mark. And we appreciate that. And we're interested in learning more from you tonight about, what we should be teaching about and what our students should know about their home city and their neighbors whose voices are marginalized. Let's go to Tony Amos. And Tony, for full disclosure, you're on the Academy board. And that's one of the many reasons that we're in love with you and your message, but tell us more about what you do.
Okay, I don't know if I should ever follow Mark again after an introduction, but I am Amos. I am co-founder of Reagan and Amos Consulting, and we do diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and cultural competency. And that is for businesses, organizations, the government, everyone, right? Because we know if you have a brain, we have bias regardless of our color. And as you said, I am on the board for Academy for Human Rights and a big fan of Drew's because of course he makes all of this possible. A big fan of all of you teachers. And that's about it for me. I have a couple of books, but I don't have them with me, so I can't do all that.
Hey, well, Katie will find them on Amazon and she'll put them in the chat room. And
Kind Kid Crew for the kids.
Kind Kid Crew, that's what we're trying to achieve through this webinar.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Tony. And Tony, let's go to Dawn Wells-Clyburn from Push Buffalo. And Dawn, we're so thankful that you could join us tonight. And so thankful that our Academy's programming is partnering with Push. And tell us more about you and the great work you do.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. It's great to meet all of you. This is my first time being a part of your group. Dawn, I'm sorry. Oh, Dawn Wells-Clyburn. I'm the Deputy Director for Push Buffalo. That's People United for Sustainable Housing in Buffalo. We are an organization that is committed to building strong neighborhoods and primarily focusing on building quality, affordable housing and really looking at all of the work that we do around housing to be comprehensive and to expand hiring opportunities. And we kind of live at the intersection of economic and environmental justice. My role currently is to oversee the affordable housing projects and to make sure that they're viable. Yeah, I think that's it for now. Thank you. And it's great to be here with the rest of you.
Thanks, Dawn. And last but not least is the incredible Alicia Huff. And Alicia, how are you tonight? And Alicia, you bring many voices to the table tonight. And, we're interested in learning more about you. And please introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, my name is Alicia Huff, and I grew up here in Buffalo, and I'm a young activist. So anything from Black Lives Matter protests to what's going on with abortion rights, queer rights, anything like that. I'm typically out in the streets protesting, talking to anybody that I can. And that's really what I love to do. I'm also a staff member for the Academy for Human Rights, and I love what I do. I love Andrew and working with everyone. And it's been a great experience, and just being a Black, queer, young voice that most people don't get to see and don't often hear about. So that's what I kind of bring to the scene for this kind of conversation that we're having tonight.
Alicia, we love you and thank you for leading us. So let me introduce, lastly, our moderator tonight, Betty Haynes, an 8th grade social studies teacher from Cleve Hill Middle School. And Betty, thanks so much for, emceeing the conversation tonight. Again, I'm sorry, I won't be able to be on the call for the remainder of the time, And I apologize about that and being overbooked here from Emporia. But to our audience, thanks so much for joining us. And, we'll look forward to seeing you at the Sustainability Conference, hopefully on July 18th. So Betty, how are you tonight?
I am great, Drew. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this. This is what a great evening we have planned. I'm going to jump in because I want to hear what our amazing panelists have to say this evening. My goal here is to amplify their voices. That's the purpose of this evening. And I would just like to hear how should teachers, students, and the general public look at the massacre of May 14th? And I'm curious who would like to take this question first for us.
Well, I can go first.
Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome. So just could you repeat the question for me?
And let me repeat the question. So how should we as educators, as students, the general public, how should we view the massacre of May 14th? First of all, let's just talk about calling it that, right? Not the shooting at cops, but the massacre, which certainly gives it the weight of intent. So if you'd like to just talk about that for a while, we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Absolutely. My first thought is treat it exactly as it is, as it was, a massacre where, people, elderly people, were going to buy groceries and were slaughtered intentionally by someone from outside of the community. And although we keep saying that, I need to say this first. We like to talk about the fact that we are the city of good neighbors and that this person had to come from miles away. Just to let everyone know that is the biggest microaggression. Actually, it's a micro-invalidation because we have neighbors right here in the city of good neighbors who are capable and more than willing to do with that. Don't want to say gentleman, but that's my thought, it slips. But what that gentleman did. So we can't sit around saying, well, he had to come from 3 hours, 3 hours away. I tell a story a lot about me being in downtown Buffalo 2019 and a baseball game letting out, and I'm around a ton of white people, but it's okay because in Buffalo we see white people in bulk, right? And that's okay. I'm used to it. I'm not afraid. I wasn't scared until another young white gentleman walked past my car as I'm at the stop sign and slammed his hands on the hood of my car and called me the N-word as he stared in my face. But of course, at that moment, I looked around and no one looked like me. Now it mattered because I wasn't sure who was going to help me. Right. And knowing what I know about Buffalo being the most segregated city in New York state, is that correct? We're very segregated, very racist, but we like to deny that stuff. So I think I probably am rattling and my time may be off, but my point is we need to treat it just as it was and to understand that just as Black people are disproportionately affected by social ills, that's one more that, this young man was able to pinpoint a place where a lot of us would be, right, without the protection of our white allies. And so I think I'm going to end there because I'll just keep talking.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think as a white person, I always feel safe in Buffalo, and I appreciate you sharing that there is a completely different viewpoint out there that we need to hear about. Someone else, Alicia, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, I think that what happened on May 14th, there's so many things to look at it and be angered, be disgusted, be scared, be heartbroken. I look at myself and, I grew up in Cheektowaga, but a lot of my family members, lived in the inner city parts of Buffalo. So I've been in Jefferson area and I've been all over Buffalo, and I know how crucial and monumental it was for our community to even get that tops in that area. You have to understand that in a place like Buffalo, especially in those city neighborhoods, we don't have Wegmans, we don't have Whole Foods, we don't have Trader Joe's, we don't have you know, grocery stores, we get Family Dollar, we get Dollar General. So for us to get a grocery store in that neighborhood that Black and brown people could go to that was accessible for us, and then to have something like that happen and to have that sense of security, because that's what Tops was for a lot of us in that community. It was a sense of security, a sense of pride, a place where we could all go and shop and not have to worry about those things. And, you know, like Tony said, to have elderly Black, old men and women there shopping and doing their daily day groceries, whatever. And unfortunately, dying and being injured and traumatized and scared. I had one of my cousins who actually worked at that Tops, and she posted on Facebook, and she said that she had to hide in the back of the cooler area, and she hid back there with the rest of other people and coworkers, crying, scared, shaking, traumatized, frightened. Nobody should ever have to be that scared. Nobody should ever have to endure anything like that. And so when we look at something like March 14th and the other shootings that have happened, because we've had so many, the question now becomes what happens next? Because I'm tired of thoughts and prayers. Let's make some policies. Let's make some change. Let's be angry. What are we going to do with that anger? What are we going to do with that frustration? What's the next conversation moving forward? And so that's, I think it starts here where we are tonight, and we're having this conversation with people. And I think that's where I'm going to leave my answer and for the next person to speak.
Thank you, Alicia. I love what you just said. And the thoughts and prayers, I just heard someone say, well, now that the news crews are packing up, what's going to happen now? And that's what we need to keep an eye on. And that's what we in this group need to keep pushing to see real change. Dawn, would you like to respond to this question?
Yes. And I'm so appreciating the way that this is being approached with the care here. And I'm a big person that really appreciates the language and the way that we use the language to describe what is happening around us. And I'm so thankful that everyone here so far is really calling it a massacre, because that's exactly what it was. I live about 3.5 blocks away from the Tops. And so when the question is posed, how should everyone be looking at this massacre? I think immediately about my impact, how I'm impacted. I returned back home 20 years ago, and I immediately became, a community activist, and then learned what it was to organize community and be entrenched and embedded into the work to understand what community means to other people besides me. And so that word keeps coming back. Like, people use it very broadly, community. What community are you talking about? Because I really want folks to know that the sense of community has been disturbed, and it's not a new conversation, right? This massacre that happened exactly a month ago is really indicative to me of the environment and the climate that was already set to have something like this happen. And even though, I think a lot of folks that, watch the news and are not in the immediate area where this happened and live here and go to that store like I have, like my husband, my children, my mother. Yeah, when the Tops was built, it was a lot of controversy about what could and should happen. And I know we're going to get into it later about, food security and, the impact of gentrification. But really, my take on this is really comprehensive, like really holistically. What is the roots of this? How come we got to a point where we just have like one grocery store instead of the community being self-determined to figure out what their needs were? Because if we're being honest, that store on Jefferson did not even really meet the needs of the entire community. It was just a small fraction of what was needed in the community. And so I think that's talking about the systems that are the systems that impact the people that live in these areas. And that's really what I would love for teachers and students and everyone that is interested to explore.
Wow, really well said. Thank you. And I want to have a conversation with you after we're done about something my students are doing in our classes. But in the meantime, I would like to hear from Dr. Abraham and see what his thoughts are on this. Thank you, Don, for that.
Yeah, so thank you. I'm a proponent of a short pencil is better than a long memory, meaning that when we're having these conversations, if it really means something to us, I think we should be taking notes. And I don't mean to be your professor at this moment, but I think we should take notes because there's going to be so much said in these conversations that there will be some things that just your memory won't be able to retain. So I think having a pencil or a pen in your hand to try to jot down if this is really resonating with you, that we're not just doing this as a formality, that we're doing this and saying, hey, we want to do something about this. To answer the question, I think we have to look at it. And we have to continually look at this massacre, this terrorist attack. We celebrate 9/11 every single year. We mourn 9/11 every single year. We talk about it. And unfortunately, what I'm afraid that we may want to have the propensity to do is the same thing we did with the George Floyd thing, where we said, well, I'm not comfortable having this conversation. And this goes to my white brothers and sisters and my white educators who say things like, well, I'm not comfortable with having the conversation. I don't really know how to approach it. And when I'm teaching teachers, I always tell them, if that was your brother, if that was your sister that was getting killed on the ground, you would have no issue with approaching it. And so just like this terrorist attack, this massacre that happened in Buffalo, although it happened to Black people, it happened to people. It happened to people that are your neighbors, that are the folks that are around you, that shop around you, and they're Black, but it happened to human beings. And I think the conversation needs to stay around. We need to look at this and we need to have conversations about this, and we need to not feel uncomfortable to call this what it was, a massacre, a terrorist attack, a hate crime, and have real conversations at home and with our children to say, this is what happens when you are inundated with hate and you're inundated with fear and you're inundated with a thought process that because someone has a different pigmentation than you are, that makes them different and that makes them anti-American or not American. So I think what's important is that we really look at this day, examine it, and never forget, because this is impacting our community and impacted the country forever. But it can't be like slavery where we want to forget about it. It can't be like George Floyd where we want to forget about it. It can't be like all the individuals that get killed all the time by cops and get killed by racist attacks, and we just want to pretend like it didn't happen. This is something that we have to remember and have conversations and make a demand at just local level that this is talked about in the curriculum every year.
Thank you for that. When you were speaking, something that came to my mind as a social studies teacher was Tulsa. And I'm going to be honest, I wasn't aware of Tulsa until, maybe 5 years ago. And so I didn't teach it because I didn't even know about it. It wasn't in any textbooks. It wasn't present in our curriculum. But now that I know better, I do better. And I hope that that is something we can take with us tonight. And if anyone has questions about how to have those conversations with their students, we have some really wonderful people here to help guide you on our screen. Which takes us to our next question, and that is about racial discrimination and what is important for us to understand about racial discrimination in the city of Buffalo, other than, my gosh, we're one of the most racially segregated cities in the nation. I know right now in the news, there's talk about covering the 33 and restoring the Humboldt Parkway area to try to bring the city back together and erase those lines. I don't know if anyone would like to volunteer to start that conversation.
I would love to volunteer to start that.
We'll go with Dawn, and then Alicia, you can jump
back.
Yeah, so I am not that old, but I'm not that young either. And I remember that number one, it would be really out of place for, it would really be um, back to the sense of community. It would really be difficult to think about community without thinking about how accessibility and how we are able to access all of the basic needs within a community, right? And so one of the main basic needs of humanity is food, clothing, and shelter. And when I think about the 33, which again, I live like in close proximity, a rock's throw to the 33 that, where we're going to a meeting in a couple of weeks to talk about that being covered. And I remember hearing conversations, and we're talking about it again with the elders that are on my block here about what happened that caused the 33 to be built in the first place. And, this was a city that was built with, to be a park system. And, years ago, and if you don't know the history, please look it up. The white flight that happened in order to make way for the 33 is one of the effects of what we're looking at right now in terms of architectural racism, as we've been asked about, and even gentrification right now. We had the park system utterly destroyed to implement the 33 so that people who were working in downtown Buffalo would be able to get to their suburbs, and they left the community and disturbed the generational wealth of the community in a way that really, again, takes me back to the root causes of where we are today in terms of housing security, in terms of having access, the issues that we're having right now with landlords, abusing tenants, and also being priced out of the neighborhoods that folks have been living in for decades. And what happens to those people? I don't want to get too far into it, but I do want to just touch on the fact that, yeah, Buffalo is a very racially segregated city, but it is also one of the poorest cities in the country, and that is in the process of being like flipped on its lid. They're calling it a renaissance, but the people who are impacted disproportionately in these moments are people that are in communities like mine. So I think it's really important to not lose that as we talk about all of the opportunities that we have to challenge why we're doing this, challenge what is really happening as we have people coming into our neighborhoods, buying up our properties that weren't a part of it. And then we're still talking about now covering up a freeway that was created to cater to and center, white people who no longer wanted to live in the city with its Black neighbors. Like, let's just take a moment to think about why those things happen, and in this moment in time, why it's being reversed. And so we have a lot of people in our community that is critical of that. And when we're talking about, what is a white ally? And, the first question that comes to my mind is, no, we're not talking about being an ally. We're talking about being, promoting abolitionists. What does it mean for you to be an abolitionist in this moment, especially as it relates to gentrification? What are you willing to get uncomfortable with? What are you willing to challenge yourself with as you talk to, students and parents about what they can do to challenge themselves in terms of how they're looking at the city and how they're looking at their communities of color. So I'll stop right there. But.
Wow, that's really powerful, though. Thank you for that, promoting abolitionism. That was something I wrote down. Okay, Alicia.
There's something that Dr. Abraham said that, like, I always say all the time, which is about comfortability, and especially
Absolutely.
for white people in general, educators, allies. If you're uncomfortable, good, because Black people and brown people have been uncomfortable in this country from the moment that we were stolen from our land and forced here and forced to work in this country. Like, we built this country and we've been uncomfortable ever since. So if you're uncomfortable, start asking yourself why you're so uncomfortable having these conversations, and actively work to change being uncomfortable, because we've always been uncomfortable. And these conversations about, you know, racism and discrimination and redlining and gentrification and all these, we're African American, we're having this in our homes. We're already having this conversation. We need you guys to start talking. We need you guys to start talking amongst each other, because unfortunately, something that aggravates me, and I get backlash when I say this, is we're gonna need white allies in order to make progress. But I think what white allies need to understand is to not take the mic and take the conversation away from us, and to step aside and let us talk and let us lead the conversation for once, because we have a lot to say and we know how to make it better. We know how to fix things, but we're always told, oh, you guys don't know. Oh, well, let us handle this. Oh, well, on the next one. And then here we are, and we still haven't seen any changes. And I think redlining, and that's something that we see often in this community, is that, for example, the roads. You know immediately when you're hitting Buffalo when you're driving, don't you? Because the roads, you're almost like in like a Cadillac, those cars that used to bump like back, and you're almost in one of those. And then you don't have people who have access to, you know, public transportation. Cars is not a right, that is a luxury. Not everybody can afford a car. Not everybody has that, because when you're a parent that's living in an inner city and your rent is, you know, more than what you make, and the house that you're living in, you know, there's not access to, you know, AC now that we're in the summertime, or in the winter, there's not enough heat. And then you're a single mother or a single Black father, and you have children that you need to put food on the table for and clothes on their backs. All this, and then you don't have opportunities to get to jobs. This is what's been put in place in our community. And then you look at us and you're like, well, why can't you guys be better? Why can't you guys move up in the world? Well, look at how much you kicked us down. You've taken away our ways of transportation. You don't give us access to jobs. We don't have healthcare. Our buildings are in shambles. So how are we supposed to elevate as a community, as people? How are we supposed to grow and do all the things that we want to do to have American success, or the white picket fence? But we don't even have the basic fundamentals of food, water, shelter, and clothing. We don't have access to it. So what do you want me to do? And I think that's something that is a huge issue, because a lot of teachers don't understand that not every student that walks through your door comes from a loving household that has parents that work jobs, that can afford to have tutors and can afford to make sure that their children does their homework and hands it in on time and all those things. Not every student has that. Again, that's a privilege. It's not guaranteed. It's not, you don't get that handed to you the moment you walk into this world. Some of us don't have that.
You.
You're welcome.
Tony, Dr. Mark, who would like to
Sure.
start?
Can you, just to remind us what the question was?
Absolutely. The question, what facets of racial discrimination in Buffalo are important for white audiences to understand? Or if we're talking about redlining, architectural racism, food apartheid, I threw the 33 out there. What would you like to amplify tonight in our discussion?
Yeah, and let me be clear that when we say racial discrimination, it is different from racism. It is different from implicit bias. It is different. Like the reason why we're saying discrimination versus bias versus racism versus prejudice versus bigotry, because they are different words that have different meaning. Now, discrimination is a power structure. It's the people in power that can discriminate. Now, anyone could be a bigot. Anyone could say the N-word and be just nasty and just be ridiculous, and anyone could do that. But not everyone has the power for discrimination. When Ms. Huff was talking about redlining, you know, I think sometimes when I talk to newer educators, or when I talk to white people and even some Black people, there's like a we don't ask questions, right? Like we just like, yeah, all the Black people want to live on the east side, and then all the Latino people want to live on the west side, and then all of the poorer white people want to live in South Buffalo, and then all of the most affluent white people, and maybe a spot of Black people want to live in North Buffalo. We pretend and we don't ask the questions like, how did that happen? You know, so it happens not by happenstance. This isn't happening by mistake. This isn't like, oh yeah, all the Black people just one day migrated to the hood and that's where they wanted to stay in the projects. No, it's literally a project. It was what the government created as a project. And so when she talks about redlining, it's essentially saying, we're gonna cut out and not give financing to this group of people and not allow them to be able to purchase homes. And you might say, hey, that's not going on now because all you need is good credit. And Wells Fargo just got in trouble for not giving refinances to Black people. When we look at the refinances that was going on in these United States of America, we see that Black people are not being privy to the opportunity to even get a mortgage on their house. So when you talk about these things and you're listening, you might say, oh yeah, this is not happening anymore. No, scratch that. Let's get a little deeper in your world. Because sometimes you might be on these calls and you might say, well, I want to be a white ally and I want to participate and I want to be a part of the fight and the struggle. Here's the issue with hypocrisy. Oh, I won't say hypocrisy, but here's the issue with that. The way you clean up a neighborhood is not by going to this neighborhood to clean up that neighborhood. It's by cleaning up your house. So I'm going to ask you a question. How many Black children are in your schools? Did you know that Black males are 3 times as more likely to be suspended than any other population in the country? How many Black children is your school referring to special education? What is the graduation percentage at your school for Black and brown children? What's the suspension rate at your school for Black and brown children? Because if we're not getting them educated and we're moving them to the side and we're acting like they don't exist, even in your affluent suburban school where there might be a small percentage, but Tyrone and Shamiqua and Shaquita and them is not being seen, you want to go to Buffalo, but you have some cleaning to do in your own house. And in your house, do you see the Black children in your classroom? What are the test scores looking like for the Black children in your classroom? So the scratch trying to get to Buffalo, deal with what's going on in your household. And then when you deal with what's going on in your household, then we can start advocating for places outside. But if you're afraid and you're listening in the teacher union lounge or wherever y'all have these hellish conversations, and they're talking about Black children, and you're too afraid to step up and say anything, you're not ready to advocate for anybody. So the key is to clean up the house that you have where you are. So yeah, there's issues with discrimination, meaning people that are in power preventing certain people because of sex, because of religion, because of race, from being able to advance themselves. Now, you are in a position of power if you're a teacher. Can the kids at your school that are in your classroom read? Are you referring them to special education? Why? Statistically, 86% of Black children going to graduate high school can't read on grade level. Black males are graduating high school about 59%. White counterparts are 81%. Black males only make up 6% of the country, but over 37% of the prison population. Black people make up 13% of the country, but over 50% of the prison population. What am I saying? That is discrimination. That is by design that's happening. It is not by happenstance. It is not by mistake. But if you're trying to think so far off, you're going to feel hopeless. You'll say, well, I can't do anything because I don't have any power to change anything. But you have the power to change the classroom and the kids that you have in front of you. And if you don't have no Black kids, you have the power to say, Black people add a contribution, and I'm going to ask as many Black people to get in front of my white children so they can see the value in Black faces. That's it.
That's it. That was fantastic. Antoinette, I am sorry. Would you like to
Yeah, what did I say? I'm not supposed to follow him, but that's okay.
That was thank you, Dr. Mark.
I wanted to talk about a couple things and not lose what Mark just said. But first I wanted to go back to what Don was talking about the 33, because I think it's really important for us to talk about the architectural racism that goes on in Buffalo and really not miss that. Because we have to
Yes.
think about this beautiful, beautiful park that went
Yes.
down that road, right? The beauty of it. But when white flight started and whites decided to leave the city and come out to the suburbs, they needed a way to get back to their jobs.
Right.
And so it was nothing to take away the beauty of this Black neighborhood to give white people access. So I want to leave that there, but I want us to remember that. No,
Thank you
no, I don't
so
want to leave
much
that there.
for
I'm
lifting
sorry.
up the beauty. Thank you so
Absolutely,
much for
because
lifting
you know,
that up.
really, we took away the beauty, and I talk about this all the time because I live on a street that's, you know, that has that island that was taken away, and I can't imagine someone coming and just taking the island out of the middle of our street for someone else to get where they need to go, and that be based on race, right, and socioeconomics. But I also want to talk about the fact that yes, how long ago was that? And now we're talking about putting it back. But why are we putting it back?
Why?
Because
That's the
those same,
question. Yes.
right, those same white folks, right, that went to the suburbs are now coming back to the city, or not that same generation, a few generations later, are coming back to the city. And so now we want to give them that beauty back, right? What does that mean for the rest of us? So
That
we mean
means,
nothing.
can
right?
we talk about that? What does that mean to the rest of us? Mrs. Amos, I mean, I swear, what does that really mean for us? And I don't mean it to kind of take it in a different direction, but it really goes back to the same thing that I think all four of us here are talking about. What is the challenge? Like, what questions are you not asking yourself that you're afraid to ask yourself? What questions aren't you asking the parents and the families and the children? Challenging their mind to think about why they're making the decisions that they're making, why we make the decisions that we make, and what are we willing to sacrifice or challenge or give up. And that's a real thing. What are you willing to give up? You're willing to give up your comfort in order to really stop and think about the impact of your own actions for an entire community or an entire generation. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, a couple more things I wanted to talk about when we talk about the fact that redlining and all this stuff was a long, long time ago. Buffalo, New York was investigated by New York State in 2021 for redlining and not limiting access to mortgages. So again, 2021, right? So we can't talk about how far this stuff, you know, how long ago it was. And when we think about it, all of our policies and procedures and laws were built on the assumed inferiority of Black people, and now we just keep making little changes and building on those same policies and laws and procedures. So we really have to think about that as well. I'm going to stop talking, maybe. I wanted to talk about an acronym that I use, again, kind of pulling together all of what the other three people said before me. It's important that we take a stand regardless of who we are. But when we think about taking a stand, you need to actually pay attention to those letters, right? So I'm talking about the S. Self-assess, and I think we all said that, right? You have to look at yourself, understanding that we all have bias, and if you don't do intentional work and you don't have a lot of direct cross-cultural interaction, then you are going to fall victim to the mental models that you have developed about other cultures. And that is all coming from what, you know, either your parents, television, internet, whatever. If you don't do the work, then you fall victim. I don't care how much you claim that you are not racist. Okay. The next one is talk. We have to have these conversations. Mark talked about it. Alicia talked about it. I think we all just talked about, we have to talk, right? But I always ask white people to talk from your position. And that means talk about your position from white power. Don't talk about my position because you really know nothing of it. But that goes back to Alicia. The next one is the A, right? So that's to amplify Black voices. That means, yeah, you talk and you talk from your position, but when it's my turn, or when you have the opportunity to hand me the mic, please do that. People have been telling our stories forever and getting it wrong. So just give us that opportunity. This is the one time where we actually know more than white people, really. So, and the next one is navigate, right? Again, navigate through racism and through all that we're talking about from your position. So wherever you have that power, wherever you have that privilege, whether it's white skin privilege, whether it's human capital privilege or social privilege, whatever your privilege, whatever your power, use it to assist, right? And to be that ally that everyone claims they want to be. And the next one is to dismantle. We have to tear this stuff down, right? So it's all about fighting. It's really taking a stand. So this is not for the weak. We have been dealing with it forever. Thank God for YouTube. I'm going to say thank God for Trump and thank God for a whole bunch of stuff, because this would not be here. We would not be having these kinds of conversations, not the way we're having them. So we have to keep this up. And I'm probably over my 2 minutes. Don't let me go last anymore.
Would anyone like to add to that?
I would say also, when we talk about having conversations about Black people, don't make the assumptions that you know anything about Black people, in a sense of you have to ask the questions, right? So when you see me sitting here and you'll look at me and say, you'll make an assumption and say, oh, he's Black, or he's African American. Don't do that, because you have to. I think the biggest problems we have is that we let race drive the conversation versus letting culture drive the conversation, right? So when you see me, you'll make an assumption. And when I talked about having, the relationship with Black and brown children, you don't want to make the assumptions that, oh yeah, I just look at that kid and they're African American and they're suffering from this, or they might be dealing with this. That's not true, because when you don't know my culture, I'm trilingual. I speak 3 languages. You didn't know that about me. Miss Amos, did you know that I spoke 3 languages?
I did not.
Yeah, I'm Haitian, so I speak English, I speak Creole, and I'm hella good with Ebonics. So I speak 3 languages, y'all. So you want to make sure that when you're talking to young people that are Black and brown, that you're actually understanding their culture and not just making assumptions by what you see with the color of their skin. I just want to add that piece in. I just felt that.
Thank you.
And there's also something too that I find frustrating, that I hear this still. If you're an educator, please stop saying that you do not see color, because by saying you don't see color, that means you are invalidating, you are not seeing your Black and brown children and the diversity that is put in place in your classrooms. See color, acknowledge color, talk about color, and stand in it and 10 toes and be proud of that, because you will have teachers and colleagues and principals and administration that will say, well, I don't see color, and think that that's like a good thing to be proud of that. Don't be proud of that, because by doing that, you're acknowledging that you don't look at the issues that are in your classroom, the issues that are in your community, the issues that your student face, the issues that go along in your hallways. Acknowledge color, talk about color, because it is something important, and it's a privilege to even to say that. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't recognize, is that in the way that you say things, in the tone of how you say things, and the words that you speak, there is privilege and there is power. And I think a lot of people don't understand that when they say certain things like, I don't see color, or I don't have to worry about that, or I don't have that issue, or that is not my problem. There is privilege in saying that, but there is also power in saying that. And think about the message that you are sending to your students when you say to them, and you say in your classrooms, I don't see color. Well, then you don't see them, and you don't care for them.
And you don't know how to stop at a red light.
Right.
That's funny. I'm sorry. A lot of people talk about being, I just want to say, I like your shirt. I can only see the top of it, but I have a feeling that, when people talk about, if you look at cultural competency, especially on a continuum, that color blindness piece is at the lower end of that, right? Because really what it's talking about, it's saying, well, it's a misnomer for some, because some people, when they say it, what they mean is I accept you as you are. But when you say I don't see color, I don't see culture, you definitely are erasing who the person is. Because in America, in America, what that means is, yeah, I'll accept you, come on in, but understand that we only celebrate Christian holidays. Yeah, I'll accept you, come on in, but don't you dare wear that big hair. Come on in, but understand, don't ask, don't tell. We don't need to know that you're gay. And how much are we missing by ignoring the other parts of people? And actually, even as parents and teachers on a smaller level, we have to think about that, ignoring truly who people are. So some people, we get what you mean when you say you don't see color, but you have to understand impact versus intent. right? Because those words are really impactful, and that wasn't my turn. Okay.
That is quite all right.
All right.
I am keeping one eye on the clock, which is really difficult to do right now. Oh, also awesome. As we wrap this up, and I can't believe we've been almost an hour.
Yeah.
I want to go back to that word that Antoinette used, and that's dismantle. And I love that word about tearing this down. And I want to look at, as a white educator, both long-term and short-term, tomorrow in my classroom, and then over the next years. What should we be doing? What conversation should we be having? Tell me what you think about this. Dismantle. How do we do this work? What would you suggest?
That's all of us.
Or any closing remarks you would like to throw in that you didn't get a chance to say. I would love to hear.
Betty, are you posing this to the whole group, or are you posing this to somebody?
To all of you, to any of you.
I think I'll reiterate my position when we talk about dismantling racism and the real work, because I'm a practitioner. And so when I go into schools and when I turn schools around and we're looking at the data for Black and brown children, I think you start there. I think you have real conversations with your administration, with your teachers, and really look at advocating for children. Can I give you a quick story for why I got into education, and then I'll let you leave with that. I'm originally from Miami, Florida, and I grew up with two friends, and their name was Tavon and Steven, and these are my homeboys. I mean, Betty, I did everything with those guys. We played basketball together. We played football together. We hollered at girls together. That just means I try to talk to girls. I told you I was Ebonics. And we went to elementary school together. We went to middle school together. And in high school, we went to 3 different high schools. I'm 6'4". I was 200 something pounds at that time. And immediately when I went to high school, they said, you're going to play Division I football. And everything the high school did positioned me to play Division I football. By the time I graduated, I wasn't that good at football, but by the time I graduated, I had 17 scholarships on the table, went to the University of Buffalo, and the rest is history. For my two friends, Tavon and Steven, they went to schools that were suspension first, discipline first, pull your pants up, don't wear your hat like that. If you act up, if you talk like this, if you bring your culture to the school, we're going to suspend you. We don't see color type schools. And they got suspended over and over and over again, and they disengaged from the educational community. They end up getting locked up and finding themselves in unsavory behaviors. And by the age of 25, Tavon and Steven were both killed and gone. What I learned experientially is that when young people, especially Black and brown children, go to schools where teachers believe in them and they set a high standard for them, when they say you're going to be this and they believe the best in the children, children rise to the occasion, no matter the color, but especially for our Black and brown children. So for you educators who say, I'm just a teacher or I'm just a teacher aide, please know that my friend would be alive today. Both of them would be alive today if they had teachers like you that were committed to come on a Wednesday night, take notes, try to do better, and have the courage to advocate for them. So I say that, and I leave that with you, is advocate for every child that you have in front of them, because you are changing their life and you're saving their life and you're changing their posterity forever. So that's what I'll leave you with on this evening. And thank you for the work that you do.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. And if you feel like jumping in, we do have some time left. We have about 20 minutes. I did want to leave a few minutes at the end if we have any questions, if you're all okay with that. Anyone else? Miss Alicia.
I would just like to say, I'm a product of a teacher, and that teacher is actually Betty, that cared about me. I'm about to cry. Oh my God. I met Betty when I was in 7th grade, and if you would have known me in 7th grade, I had a mouth on me. Oh my gosh. I had a mouth, and I had an attitude, and I had a sass that backed it up to follow along. And I think Betty And I think her colleague, Nancy, they saw that I was one of those kids that I was very smart, very bright, very outgoing, but I was one of those kids that could have went down either the 2 lanes. I could have went down the right path, as I would say, or I could have went down a different path. And I'm very lucky and I'm very fortunate that I had someone like Betty in my life that kind of grabbed me from the back of my shirt, as I would say, and threw me down the path that I am now. And I always tell people, I do not know who I would be, where I would be, or the type of person that I would be without a teacher like Betty in my life. So when you care about Black students and you love Black students and you nourish Black students and you give power behind their voices and you tell them that they can do anything and they can be anything in this world, and you continue to show them that, we start to believe it and we start putting power into ourselves and we start being more and giving more effort instead of, suspending us and kicking us out of school and things like that. I am literally an example of a teacher just giving an F about me for one moment and giving the time to hear about my story and wanting me to be more in this world and not giving up on me or suspending me or just kicking me out the door. So if you don't think that, like, as a teacher, as an educator, that the work that you do day in and day out with your students, you think that it doesn't mean anything, I am literally the first example to sit here and tell you that it means everything. It means everything to us, because not a lot of students have that. And you could be that person for many students. And that's it, because I'm going to cry if I keep talking about this. So I'm done.
Since we're loving on Betty, I just want to say my son is in love with her too. I just want to throw that in there since we're talking about her already.
Very mutual. I love your son too. You're both amazing. Alicia, you're very kind. Thank you. You are a very easy person to love. Maybe not so much when you were in 7th grade, but we got through that.
I've mellowed out. I've mellowed out at 24. I've mellowed out.
Well, we'll see about that. Antoinette.
I would like to say I actually went to school 53 in the city of Buffalo. And when I say we were loved by some of the most amazing, beautiful, well put together, well-spoken Black women I've ever seen in my life. The thing was, they were very stern, but they were loving. And so you knew that you were loved, right? And I thought about this story last night because I had, out of my 7 years there, right, I had 2 white teachers. And both of them I remember for very different reasons. My 4th grade teacher, she was very stern, very nasty. I thought she couldn't stand me. Pretty much my first interaction with a white person in charge like that. Very mean, very disconnected, not like the other teachers that I had. And one day I spelled my name wrong. Antoinette, 10 letters, right? Somehow I left, because we were writing in cursive, somehow I left one of the letters out. Well, the teacher decided that that was so egregious that I now had to write my name 150 times after school. So I did that. But what she didn't know, because she didn't know the community, was that now she was going to send a 9-year-old child, female child, outside to walk home when no one else was around. All right. So I did get accosted by an older male. When luckily, I always say this older girl came by. Now she was older. She had to be about 12. But she saved me. But the point was, because I spelled my name wrong, really, was it worth that? I had to stay after school. I've never gotten in trouble, right? Because I'm the quiet type. I'm going to be good. I don't want to be involved. But all of that caused me real trauma. So, okay, and I don't want to cry. Alicia, this will be your fault. Okay, so this is why I remember that teacher. Now, the other white teacher that I had was amazing, hugged us, laughed with us, cared about us, brought, if she went out for something and we had some sort of reason to stay after school, then she brought stuff for us. I remember her because she was a beautiful soul, right? So she fit right into the school. But the other woman who wanted to punish me and then put me in danger as a result of not understanding my culture or my neighborhood or my community, that matters, right? So I didn't want to end on a bad note, but it's too late. No, I do want to say about School 53, just to let you know, by the time I was in 6th grade, I had a passport. I had traveled many, many places, including Spain and England, thanks to the Black principal who believed in us and who made it happen. So it's things like that, right? If I could miss Manwood of School 53, what an amazing place to be and to go. And so many of us that came out of that school were successful, right? Because even if we did not have the love and everything we needed at home, we got it at the school. And even though we know discipline was possible, that was even out of love, except for by my 4th grade teacher. But anyway, I did want to share that story. So I'm going to end there because I know you said we have questions.
Thank you. And Dawn, I don't want to cut you off as well. Would anything to add about what we can do as teachers to start dismantling this?
Yeah, I'll just say that I'll talk about the experience that I had as a mother. I really want to lift up a story of how I came into making the decision, my husband and I, to homeschool our children. And it started with my oldest son, he's 14. When he was in 3rd grade, he, had an experience, he was at a charter school, and it was, I think, a situation where we had on the West Side, that's where we lived at the time, and all of the children were Black and children of color, so there were immigrant children, and the entire school was run by white teachers and white administrators, and the only people of color who were really in part of the structure was the teachers' aides, and there were only a few. And one of the few incidents that happened that really just like sealed the deal for us was, I walked in and the teacher was screaming at the top of her lungs at my son, who, at that point in time was on an IEP. Okay, when Dr. Mark was talking about like the disproportionate effect of people, people of color, Black children, and children of color that are being referred to special education when they process differently, or when the teacher can't connect, is a real thing. And for him to have been at that school for 2-3 years and have had that experience and other experiences, it was just like the straw that broke the camel's back after experiencing like a lot of different racialized incidents at the school involving the teachers and the administration with the kids. And so we made the decision to do that, to leave that school and to begin to learn how we can teach our children at home. And it wasn't easy, right? Like there's no resources for parents that are teaching at home. You don't have the support system. And I'm saying all of that to say that when parents have teachers that don't care, teachers that don't care about their students or don't show interest or don't take the time to find out and learn about the children, it really impacts the entire family, and it impacts us financially, educationally. And I think it's a lot of work that can be done to continue to challenge all of the administrative systems. And I say challenge because I believe that, again, the people who are closest to the problems are closest to the solutions. And so there are good teachers, right? And those that are really good and really interested in being a help and being an ally have a charge, if you really believe that. And that charge is to call out what you see, challenge it, set the table for conversations to happen with parents in a meaningful way, to trust the process, to trust the parents that they do know what's going on with their children, when they do know, because some don't. But when you just trust, to have trust that the people that are coming and trying to get their children taught really want what's best for their children and don't want to send their kids to school to be abused. And so I think that if we're answering the question, if I'm being asked the question, what can be done in those situations with teachers, it's one thing, you know, that kind of could lead into a lot of different solutions, and that's setting the table for those conversations. So where I'm at right now, we intentionally set the table to have like a caucus for white people to help solve the issues and deal with all of the teachings that need to happen and all of the questions that need to be answered for white folks who are not accustomed to dealing or don't have that cultural competency to deal with students of color or people of color in my particular industries, people of color, the community, right? And then we have intentionally set the table for a BIPOC caucus. So people who are of color and have concerns and issues and want to learn, you know, critical consciousness, this is where you can practice and learn how to show up in space better, how to challenge the administration, how to come together, how to organize yourselves as teachers in order to get, you know, a better curricula, to introduce books on history, on the Tulsa massacres, and, you know, everything that I think we have, all those conversations that we have to have as parents, Black parents and Black educators and professionals with our children. Like I have to talk to my child about these things at an early age in order to prepare them for the world of being a Black child in a world that is, you know, racist. And this is how you navigate around it. And so if I have to teach my child that at home, then teachers in these institutions need to be prepared to have that conversation. And so you have to do your part to educate yourself on what those things are. So that's what I would like to say. Challenge, trust, and set the table for those conversations to happen, to do your own work in your own spaces.
Wow, thank you. Thank you all so much for your candidness, your willingness to have this conversation. Thank you also to the participants today. I see we have no questions in our chat, and I think that's because I know I have 2 pages of notes, and I have a lot to think about myself as a white teacher in a classroom. Thank you, Antoinette Amos, for being with us, and Alicia Huff for sharing your passion with us. Dr. Mark, thank you. And Don, thank you as well. You've given us a lot to think about and hopefully a few things to do moving forward. Please check out their books. To all of our participants, please check out the books that you see, the services offered by our panelists. Be in touch with us if you want to continue this conversation. You can reach us through our website. Check out the summer symposium for your students. If this conversation sparked something today that you would like to have your students participate in, this is the kind of conversations that we have every summer at the symposium. I'm going to ask Katie, as we have people leaving, thank you so much to everyone. I'd like our panelists to stay just for a moment of housekeeping, if that is all right. And thank you, everyone, and have a fantastic summer. I hope you all get to stay cool somewhere tonight. Those of us who love my God. Ooh.
See you guys later.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.